Christmas and we were very excited.
For me, it was the worst nightmare that you couldn't get out of.
Careful with it when you're hitting it. Careful you don't.
The not knowing where he was so difficult. Just thinking of what could be happening to him. It was unbearable. It was just awful. It was getting dark, just about 5 or 6 o'clock. I think the police came out. They had started to search, take it seriously. Not that they hadn't been before, but again, I think it was the realisation that something had happened to him.
After Gerard was reported missing to the police later that afternoon, there was a commencement of the search.
It was just so unlike him. I mean, they were seeing sightings. I think there was a little boy, they said they'd seen him on a bus, and I knew it wasn't Gerard because it wasn't his nature to do anything like that.
Yeah. He would have no reason to go on a bus.
Yeah. So I knew something bad had happened.
We knew after 24 hours there was no reason for him to go missing. I mean, he was a happy kid. He had his money in his hand to go to the comic shop, and he was with his brother. He had no association in the area, so he had no idea. It's not as if he'd run away with a couple of schoolmates. So we were pretty sure when it was first reported, when it first came through to us, that there was an issue.
9:30 this morning and a full-scale search swings into action.
That area there, covering here.
Gerard James Ross, holidaying in Rockingham from his home in Newman, had been missing for 24 hours. Already though, major crime squad detectives were on the case.
They've been called in to give us assistance and to help us with advice. We're extending the actual search and the way that the inquiry is being conducted, and their expertise will come in handy.
Police admit he might have been abducted.
We can't discount that. He's made arrangements to meet his brother at a predetermined place, and it's only a short distance from where they were staying, and he's disappeared from in between leaving home and where his brother was waiting for him.
Start heading out on 318.
All day long, SES volunteers and police searched bush and beaches. Residents were questioned, motorists checked. But by this afternoon, the situation was clearly critical.
Obviously, something has happened, and we're treating it very seriously.
So the search actually went for a period up to the 25th of October. So and over those days there were up to 150 people involved, SES members, police officers, the mounted section, police mounted section. There were recruits from the police academy that were involved in it, the police air wing, and there's also sea searches as well.
It wasn't common at all to go on a child search. Usually if kids went missing, they were around at their friend's house or across the road or whatever. We actually started searching around the streets around this area. Then from day 2 onwards, we started going down to the beach. We did the full length of the beach, which in Rockingham is quite extensive. We then started looking at the parks around the area and any vacant land, obviously.
There was certainly a large-scale door knock of all the surrounding streets from Kent Street. A large number of the houses were searched as well, including backyards, internal searches, garages, vehicles that were within the boundaries of those houses. So it was a large boundary, and certainly a lot of houses were searched at that time looking for Gerard.
The police came and went through this property, you know, all the back sheds and all the bedrooms and everything.
They came to the real estate offices asking for access to all the vacant properties in the immediate area. For some reason I was chose to coordinate all that, and I went to the other agencies, got the keys to all their vacant properties, and me and the cops went out and checked out all the vacant properties. I mean, each house we went into, they went through all the rooms. They went out in the back, they checked out outside toilets, sheds, everything.
We were having a bus trip that morning to Guildford, and we left just shortly before he disappeared. We would have left earlier, only one of our members actually cut herself, so we were holed up coming inside again and getting band-aids, so it took us a while to take off. So it's quite vivid. We were the only people in the street when we got on the bus. Didn't see any kids or anything else. It wasn't until we got home from the bus trip, which was about 3 o'clock, and I dropped one of our members at his place, and his wife came running out and said that the little boy had disappeared and that the police had been there and they'd searched all the yards up and down the streets. So they did a very thorough search of all the yards and interviewed all the people in the area.
To anyone who knows where Gerard is or has any information about his disappearance, please come forward.
I had heard the news the night before, but I honestly didn't connect until one of the parishioners, who was Scottish, came in to me in the morning and said, "Did you hear the story about Gerard?" And when I got there, I remember the media was there at the time, and they directed me to the house. I never forget the situation. It was so sad to see. I remember Cyrese just walking up and down the floor, holding her tummy. And being 6 months pregnant with twins, you can imagine, well, it's hard to imagine, for anyone to imagine what that was like.
I was part of the original task force the day after Gerard went missing. My initial role was that of family liaison officer, and I obviously made contact with Gerard's family throughout the investigation. I met them on the morning of October the 15th. Cyrese, she was heavily pregnant. She was obviously very distressed about the fact that Gerard had not turned up since the previous day. Stuart also was very distressed, however, quite a stoic Scotsman, was there to make sure that the family held it together.
If you have any information at all, please help.
Stuart Ross is a desperate father. His youngest son, 11-year-old Gerard, has disappeared. The family...
I started burying all the thoughts straight away, so Cyrese was grieving a lot more emotionally than me, that I was looking after the children and trying to put a brave face on things for their sake, and I just tried not to think about what happened.
Family liaison officer, apart from building a rapport with the victim's family, provides an exclusive contact point between the investigation team and the family. In addition to that role, we also interviewed the family to either implicate or eliminate them as suspects in the investigation.
I mean, the police investigation was quite full on. You know, most of these things that go wrong with children going missing, there's some family involvement, and you know, we understood that. So I remember, you know, saying to them to happily take Malcolm and Beth to speak to them on their own, away from us, so that you knew it wasn't family involvement, so they could get on with looking for the person that's done this and find Gerard.
But you certainly look at everything, every possibility. I mean, even families come under scrutiny, you know, which is awful. But it's the case. 90% of your work is elimination.
In the early days, it was hoped he'd be found close by. But as the days drew on, we had to expand that search to virtually one side of Rockingham to the other side of Rockingham.
So those 2 weeks, there was a lot of people in and out the property.
I felt very powerless. There's nothing that I could do Being a parent, you want to protect your children, see the best for them, and I was sitting there so annoyed at myself that I couldn't do anything.
It doesn't matter what's happened. If someone knows Gerard where he is or what's going on, let them go.
It was just such a difficult thing to go through. It was like an out-of-body experience. You know, I remember having a shower and thinking, I'm having a shower and my son's missing. It was the silliest things that you could think of, that you're thinking, how am I actually able to walk or do anything and he's away?
I think quite quickly I went into just being quite numb, obviously being really scared, but I think I did start to withdraw quite quickly.
It's extremely baffling. I think the whole circumstances are that within a few hundred metres, the boy just simply disappears off the face of the earth.
I believe that, you know, he really did, in his own mind, believe that perhaps if he had stayed with his brother, he may not have disappeared in the manner in which he did.
The what ifs is so destructive. I mean, I'm not saying we didn't go all through all that process for a long time, but in reality, you know, what ifs don't really change anything. The person that done it, you know, they're the one that's guilty.
I was a mum probably of similar age to Gerard's parents, and had kids of a similar age back then. So, yeah, I think it really hit home what they were going through. But my response to the whole situation was that I think of just many other West Australians, just real shock at what had occurred. I had actually spent a lot of family holidays myself at Rockingham with my grandparents over the years, and indeed they had a house on Kent Street, so it was an area I was very familiar with. It's an area that you know, I'd had a lot of great holidays as a child myself, and an area that you would have thought was pretty safe.
From a safety perspective, if I had a 10 or 12-year-old at that time and said, Dad, I'm going to walk up to the shops and get a comic, I would have let him go, because I thought it was very safe.
We've searched the area very, very thoroughly, and we're satisfied that all possibilities have been covered. We haven't located him. We've got to look now at the contingency that yes, he is outside of this area.
I knew obviously when somebody goes missing, it's obviously not a great sign, but not to the extent of what was to come next.
The rest of us were just numb, you know. What is going on to these beautiful people, you know? And they come to get the grandmother. That's why they were there. So, you know, that's why the kids were there, because they're going to pick up the grandmother. She's coming Scotland, yeah. So, yeah, no good.
It was a very distressing event, and obviously it had a lot of news coverage, and was a event that people were talking about across the community, across Australia actually, how this could happen on this street in broad daylight.
You always hope that somebody is going to turn up, you know. I mean, when you look back to the Burnies, they were capturing people and holding them in a house for quite a few days before they killed them. And there was always hope that, you know, perhaps it would turn up somewhere.
I thought something drastic had happened, but I always had the hope that he would turn up, he'd walk through the door again.
The day that he actually went missing, the principal came to the classroom, and the principal and myself informed the class and the class next door, the other Year 7s as well. And then it was later announced at an assembly. It was difficult to break out, but they were a very mature group, And so they decided that they would still put his chair out every morning and all his gear on his table. So yeah, they did that every day for 2 weeks until he was found.